fight for health freedom continues. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Listen to this headline posted on one of the federal health bureaucratic websites, the National Library of Medicine, under the National Center for Biotechnology Information, or vice versa. It's all at the National Institutes of Health. But this headline was posted for an article that was penned back in April of 2021. America's deadly flirtation with anti-science and the medical freedom movement. Counter that with what Congressman Chip Roy for Texas has put as a headline on his congressional website, the case for healthcare freedom. Look, this fight still wages today, the fight for the right as an individual to direct your own medical choices, that of yours, that of your minor age children, right? There should not even be an argument in American politics, in America's government, in even the culture, and yet it is. COVID did such a massive disservice to the fate of this nation's individual freedoms, specifically God-given freedoms, that, I said it back then and I'm saying it again now. I don't know if this nation can ever return from that corner of COVID-style chaos and COVID clampdowns on individual freedom. It really was tyranny in America. And if you think that it can't happen again, well, think again, really, because being asleep at the wheel of freedom doesn't do a service to the state of freedom. It really just allows those who want to steal your freedoms the easy peasy opportunity to sneak in and steal them. And so we have to remain ever vigilant, right? That our individual freedoms, our individual rights and freedoms, our God-given individual rights and freedoms aren't being stolen, aren't being seized, and aren't being willingly given up for whatever reason the government says. Before I get into more of this, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, that's the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel Chino Hills Church in California. Great place, great site, RLN. You're going to want to download the app. You're going to want to sign up for some of the offerings they put out there, including Bold and Blunt, because it gives you all of today's news from a faith-based perspective. You may get Bold and Blunt at Washington Times as well. Just scroll to the bottom of the WashingtonTimes.com webpage, find the newsletter section, and go ahead and sign up for Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. That's my newsletter. Comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you'll get delivered right to your email box, my Bold and Blunt podcast, as well as my commentaries that I write every day at the Washington Times. I have a good video Bold and Blunt coming up with Alex Trayman. He is a guy in Israel. He is actually the CEO of JNS, that's the Jewish News Syndicate. Great place to get your news. And he's also the Jerusalem Bureau Chief for that same JNS, jns.org. Very interesting discussion with him just today, as I record, just today. And we talked about the fate of the peace treaty, right, which is rapidly crumbling. You blink and whoops, it's gone. You knew that was coming with Hamas, right? How do you make peace with an organization that has an end game of eradicating you, right? What's the compromise there? Okay, we'll only eradicate half of you. That's not really a solution, right? You cannot strike bargains with evil. But anyhow, as I was saying, you're going to want to sign up for my newsletter to get that delivered to your email box. But guess what? You can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. And if you do get them online, at Spotify, Apple, wherever, you'll be able to see all the reviews that people leave. And I got to say, by and large, they're all good, right? The left hasn't really snuck in to screw up the rating system there. Surprise, surprise. America's deadly flirtation with anti-science and the medical freedom movement, 2021, okay, from National Institutes of Health. They're just trying to slide in there really quickly, right? Really quickly, get that last bit of propaganda going about COVID and about any American citizen who dared take an individual approach to deciding, should I wear a face mask? Should I send my kid to school? Should I walk about in public? Should I get the shots/vaccines, which are really experimental shots? Should I do that? They're really aimed at striking down that sort of dissenting opinion. America's deadly flirtation with anti-science and the medical freedom movement. In other words, if you dare disagree with the government bureaucratic narrative on health issues, then you are anti-science and you are furthering death and mayhem in the public. And you're also part of this crazy conspiratorial tinfoil hat wearing medical freedom movement, right? That's the takeaway that you're supposed to get from that headline. The initial United States government response to the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic, I'm reading from the bureaucratic website in case you didn't pick up, was marked by a frequent disconnect between government policies and the recommendations of scientific experts. A disinformation campaign from the Trump White House convinced many Americans that COVID-19 injuries and its death toll were exaggerated, leading many to ignore public health recommendations. Well, exaggerated or not, we really don't have a true count on the number of people who died solely from COVID. I know this because I did the deep dive diligence research to pour through the data and go through the numbers and sift through all the narratives to hopefully come at some sort of truth and give you those in one of my recent books, Lockdown, The Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom, which was all about COVID and all about how hospitals were shut down around the nation at government bureaucratic order, leaving these hospitals vulnerable to financial distress because they could not perform their normal, usual, routine surgical procedures and life-saving procedures and medical procedures. And so what happened? Well, here came the government, here came the federal government with, for every case of COVID, we're going to give you X amount of dollars. I want to say from memory, it was something like $7,500, or maybe it started at that amount and then went up per patient depending on what hospital system it was or what state it was. But it was a sizable amount. And so then if you had to perform certain procedures on this COVID patient, you got more money. And if the patient died from COVID, then you got more money. So it became an encouragement, an enticement for these hospitals to report more and more and more cases of COVID-19 deaths, right? I mean, that's just common sense. It's either that or close down because you couldn't get your money from doing any other procedures because the government had ordered hospitals to shut down and stop doing other procedures to make way, to make bed space for the projected, expected, anticipated numbers of COVID-19 patients that came from computer modeling, right? Way back at the outbreak, Anthony Fauci going to that old computer modeling system, the same type that gives us these gloom and doom climate change alarmist predictions. The same sort of thing going on with COVID-19. Anthony Fauci saying potentially, perhaps, maybe we could see this amount of deaths if we don't do what the government tells us to do. If the government doesn't listen to what I, Anthony Fauci, I am science, tells the government what to do. So when we talk about exaggerated COVID-19 deaths and exaggerated COVID-19 numbers, truthfully, we really don't know because those numbers are gone. That data is long, long gone. All right, let's skip over to Congressman Chip Roy's webpage because he has some interesting information there that goes to the idea of American individuals maintaining free choice over their health care. He writes, or his page posts, U.S. healthcare spending reached $4.9 trillion in 2023. As a share of the nation's gross domestic product, health spending accounted for 17.6%, and costs are growing around 1% faster than the annual GDP. If conservatives care about a strong national defense and low taxes, these trends have to be reversed. I'm going to read 3 more bullet points from his page. Multiple insurance companies, including United Health, Anthem/Elevance, and Humana, earn, and that's earn, he put that word in quotation marks, a majority of their revenue from taxpayers, from you and me. Did you know that? These major insurance companies derive the greatest amount of their revenues from taxpayers. We do not, this is him, this is Congressman Chip Roy's summary now. We do not have a free market in the healthcare system. The government controls more than 80% of health spending. And finally, last point here, Congressman Chip Roy, the left's solution to fix our healthcare system is spending even more money and giving the government even further control over the healthcare system. Medicare for all. Remember Senator Bernie Sanders saying the socialist love affair with socialized free medical for everybody. Free meaning paid by you and me, the earning class in America. Medicare for all would cost an additional $33 trillion over 10 years, and it would leave 70% of Americans financially worse off. I just want to backtrack to that last bullet point on Congressman Chip Roy's webpage. We do not have a free market in the healthcare system. And then he goes on to say, once again, the government controls more than 80% of healthcare spending. This is on his page called The Case for Healthcare Freedom. Well, let me ask you this. As an American citizen, how can you maintain control over the direction of your own healthcare decisions when the government controls 80% of healthcare spending? Right? And the major insurance companies, so they're supposed to be free market, well, they get the most of their revenues from taxpayers, from tax dollars. The system seems a little bit rigged against the private citizen, does it not? Meaning the system seems a little bit destructive of free market, of individual choice, of the right as an American citizen to make one's own medical decisions. It's a God-given right and liberty. But the way the system is set up right now, it's rigged. It's destructive of the God-given. And we're rapidly moving down a path of government-granted healthcare rights, government-granted healthcare decisions. That is tragic. That would be a tragic outcome for America because, look, you hand the government control over healthcare, they control your lives. It's like controlling the food supply, right? It's healthcare, food, it's basic necessities, basic human needs, and it needs to remain in the hands of the private market, and it needs to remain in the hands of the private individual citizen to decide for self and for family. And if you want to look at what an America with a government in total control of healthcare would look like, just remember how it was under COVID. Just remember how all for the sake of healthcare and safety for all, health safety for all, we all had to shut down. We all had to shut down, shut up, stay home, and do not ask questions. Do not disobey the government narrative. Remember that? I do. It was only a second ago, and it could happen oh so quickly. And that's how freedom is stolen. Oh so quickly, a blink of an eye, only a second. Well, I have with me today a guest who I'm happy to have with me because he is a true example of somebody who stands strong for individual rights, for God given rights, for individual liberties in America. And he stands against the force and fury of many who hate individual freedom and actually fear freedom. And he's got a proven track record of doing it. Dr. Joseph Ladapo, Surgeon General of Florida and freedom fighter and author. Thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. So great to have you here.
Hey, always a pleasure to speak with you, Cheryl.
There's so much I want to talk about with you, and I know we only have about 15 minutes. So let's just start with the new MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again. What is your reaction to this entire campaign?
I am really excited about it and happy about it. I think that Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is bringing more attention alongside with President Trump, more attention to very important issues. I mean, all the different ways that our health has generally been sacrificed at the altar of profit. And I'm thrilled about it. I'm very grateful for what the Secretary is doing. I'm grateful that the president is giving him the leeway to do it. And really, really excited about it.
And speaking of the president, you got to meet with President Trump in the Oval Office, correct? What was that like?
I did, yeah. Early on in the pandemic, with Dr. Scott Atlas invited me and Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and Dr. Martin Kulldorff and Dr. Cody Meisner to the Oval Office to chat with President Trump about, like, it was the summer of 2020, about, the school closures and lockdowns and just thinking about the pandemic. As we know, that was there was a lot happening at that time. Things were quite hot, quite heavy, and it was really cool. It was awesome. It was terrific. I mean, I come from a very modest background. I was born in Nigeria, and my parents immigrated here when I was about 5. So to have the opportunities and the blessings and to be able to to be at that in that setting, in that location, it's just a testament to the magic and the power and the grace of what the founding fathers envisioned when they took courageous steps to establish the idea of America.
Well, it was a well-deserved invitation in my view because let's talk a bit about COVID, because during COVID, I was alarmed at so much that was taking place in America, how quickly Americans were willing to give up their individual God-given liberties out of fear. And you were one of the few medical voices out there who were bringing some common sense to the equation. And you actually wrote a book after it, Transcend Fear, a blueprint for mindful leadership in public health, which went so lacking during that time. Go back in time and talk about how you struggled to bring sanity to the debate during the COVID years.
Oh, I did struggle. And really, mostly I lost in the on a day-to-day basis, but in the grander scheme, I and others who championed, sensibility and freedom and sovereignty and personal responsibility prevailed. It was very very lonely time. I wrote a number of articles in the Wall Street Journal, saying let's end these lockdowns. Let's not do these mask mandates. They were not evidence based. Let's not force everyone to get COVID-19 vaccines. I mean, it's not a good idea. You should think about risk, and there's a lot we don't know yet about the vaccines. And I, at every time I was lambasted for my ideas. So it was not an easy time, but I'm certainly grateful to have had the courage and the support and the clarity to take those positions. I think it did offer a lot of hope to, I would say, the I'm not sure if it was a silent majority. It was at least a silent minority, and of course that minority has become more like the majority now in terms of where people are in their positions. So, a very special time.
But nobody came out and apologized to you, right? Nobody said, you know what,
You
you were
know,
right. You were right from the beginning. Not that you expected, but that's true, right?
yeah, no one has. No one has. And, it's funny because I make mistakes all the time. And when I make a mistake, I let people know, hey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. But we just haven't seen any of that humility with so many of my physician colleagues and health officials and other media critics.
So I'm curious how you think the state of America is now. If we were to go through a COVID-like fear again, do you think this nation would be so quick to cede its individual liberties?
I don't think so, but I don't think that we wouldn't. That wouldn't happen either. I think what we would see is far more resistance from people. There's just so many more people who are aware of how they were misled and how the pandemic was mismanaged from a policy perspective, that it would be much more difficult. And I don't think it's impossible because, unfortunately, really to not make yourself vulnerable to fear actually takes a lot of spiritual work. And most people just haven't done that work. And I wish more people would, because it would make them so much stronger and so much more resistant to these little tricks and attempts to get them to basically give up their sovereignty over through the channel of fear. But a lot of people just, unfortunately, haven't done the work. I was blessed. I did the work. I did, and I continue to do the work in terms of working on my spiritual, emotional, and physical being, so that I'm not so susceptible to it. But unfortunately, a lot of people are. So I think if the temperature does get high enough, you will, unfortunately, you could pull another COVID.
It's interesting that you put it in those terms, because I always thought that COVID was more a spiritual battle, where it was a demonic influence that had sort of taken over people's minds, than anything more of the fleshly world.
And you were absolutely correct. There's no doubt about it. COVID was a war that was waged on the spirit, and sadly feasted on the spirit and the fear of so many people. And you look at COVID, look at how many doctors revolted eventually. Revolted. I mean, that we've never had anything like that in modern history. So why is it? Because the underlying energy that pushed all that stuff, the isolation, the loss, the attack, assault on personal sovereignty, the submission to a technocracy instead of our humanity and our love and our connection and our instinct and our impulses. All of that is war on the soul, on the spirit of what we are, who we are, our connection to God, all of that. That's why so many people increasingly just have this, and over the course of the pandemic, just became completely opposed to the measures that were being taken. And it's why it continues to divide people to this day, because it's speaking, whether people are aware of it or not, but for many people it speaks to their soul, and their soul is saying, no thank you, devil.
That is so well put. I think that was the root of the entire pandemic and the reaction of government and citizens alike. In your book, Transcend Fear, what are some of the things that you discuss? Because I think there is a loss of trust among American citizens in their federal bureaucracies. Rightly so, I think.
Yeah. So I talk about my own history, just even my childhood and traumatic experiences that I had, and how those experiences shaped me, and eventually how I met my wife and fell in love with her accidentally. literally by talking on the phone, and how she, as a very intuitive healer, helped direct me to a guy named Christopher Maher, who was able to teach me some exercises, engaging with me, have me engage in some activities, physical, energetic, spiritual, that help me unburden that stress and that trauma and that tension, and help me get free of those things. And I talk about how that eventually impacted my work at UCLA, how that impacted my response to the pandemic, and how that impacts my thinking and my actions, up to this day.
So if you want to give advice to parents nowadays, right? Because parents are probably confused about whom to trust when it comes to the health choices for their children. What would you advise them? Where would they turn?
I think it's so important to do your homework, and and listen to your instincts. We have three boys. Each one is different. One of my boys is just very sensitive, for example, to different types of foods and chemicals and sugar and things like that. And he is not going to do as well with, like, say a medication, whatever that medication is, or a vaccine, it doesn't matter. He's not going to do as well, and not going to be able to tolerate it as well as his brothers. And parents, it's very important for them to listen to their intuition. And I would say fortunately, we have a lot of great books out there right now. Karen Siri just recently wrote a book entitled Vaccines Amen. I think it's a great resource. There's another great book called Turtles All the Way Down, about vaccines, recently released. It's just excellent. I learned quite a great deal with that book. And there are a lot of other resources too. And I think, parents need to educate themselves and fight like hell for your kids, because doctors who make you feel ashamed for advocating for your kid, if that means like diverging from some vaccine schedule or whatever the recommendation is, those are doctors that you don't need in your life. We need to get back to personal responsibility, and we need to get back to listening to those things in us that are really divine gifts, like our intuition.
So the CDC, I believe, just backed off recommending COVID shots, regular COVID shots, thankfully. But you've been saying that for a very long time now. You've had some concerns about the COVID shots. Can you talk just in the last couple minutes a little bit about what your concerns are, particularly when it comes to administering them to children?
There are a lot of side effects to them, some of which are very damaging. From the data I've seen, I believe that they're suppressing people's immune systems. That's probably one of the biggest ones. And the problem with that is that when something does suppress your immune system, it not only affects your ability to fight other infectious diseases, it also affects your ability to fight and prevent cancer. It can affect your energy level. It can affect other aspects that are all tied into your immune system. So that's one major, major issue with them. In addition to that, there's documented and published evidence of these mRNA COVID-19 vaccines increasing the risk of people having strokes, people having blood clots in their lungs. People certainly having heart problems, such as inflammation in the heart and myocarditis, and autoimmune conditions, and in addition, neurologic conditions, some of which can be extremely devastating. I have friends and colleagues that I've met through, for example, React 19, who've, healthy, happy, very active people all their lives until they took the mRNA COVID-19 vaccine. So they're terrible in terms of their side effects, and then this attack on the immune system, which I do think that they are having, from the evidence I've reviewed, is that has long-term malignant implications.
Is there ever going to come a time when we can expect that the health bureaucracies and big pharma acknowledge the hazards and perils of these shots, or is it going to be like a Agent Orange thing? They wait until a generation dies before the truth comes out.
Oh, so sad. I think we're getting there. I know Secretary Kennedy's working extremely hard. I know him. I admire him. I really appreciate him. And he is an extremely dedicated and hard worker. So, probably not a moment goes by where he's not thinking about how to advance the health and support the health of Americans in every way possible. And this is one of those ways. So I don't know exactly what he has in mind, but I know he's hard at work thinking about it.
And just last question for you, Dr. Joseph Ladapo. What's going on, the newest health issue in Florida that you're facing?
We've had some cases of pertussis or whooping cough, and these cases have led people to really advocate for vaccine mandates. We need the mandates. We need the mandates. And we don't want anyone to be sick, and you never know why these things happen. I mean, they're South Carolina, I believe, recently had a bunch of measles cases. I mean, you just don't know why. There's a randomness to a lot of these outbreaks, and frankly, we haven't had many this year, but in Florida. But it's sad. People think that mandates are okay because you're going to get more people to take vaccines. And first of all, it's not even clear that's true. There are countries that don't have any mandates and have very high uptake, like Sweden and Denmark and Norway. But second of all, this whole the ends justifies the means way of thinking is like a very pernicious way of thinking. And it's very unethical. I mean, the ends do not justify the means. The ends are the ends of the means, and the means are the means. So let's pursue the ends, if we think that they're important ends to pursue, through a means that is ethical. And these vaccine mandates are not ethical. And the coercion is not ethical. The loss of informed consent is not ethical. So, I'll keep beating that drum.
Yeah, it's a very communist way of thinking, right? A very collectivist mindset.
So absolutely.
Joseph Ladapo, you really are an American hero. Your fight through the whole COVID year, standing up for individual rights, continuing today. Thank you so much for taking a time out to come on Bold and Blunt. Really appreciate it.
Love you. Thank you. Thanks, Cheryl. Always a pleasure.
Dr. Joseph Ladapo, I should say. And, he really is a hero. He is one of those few patriotic Americans, the rare breed that is willing to stand against the entire nation if it means defending individual liberties. And after all, isn't that what founding fathers themselves promoted? I want to thank you for listening. Remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. And meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.